Hey, man, I'm excited for this because I kind of have no idea what I'm gonna do, but I'm jazzed. Like Joji was just still one of the best movies I've seen this year, if not the best movie I've seen this year. It just sits in my brain. I think about it all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
It's a masterwork. It really, really crushed it. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing pretty good. Definitely excited about this one. We're sort of doing another interview, guys, another interview reaction. We sort of liking, we sort of enjoy doing these things. We've done a few on our channel. First time, Doug, you're sort of doing it, so this is going to be interesting. But like, I don't like, like me, like, you're somebody that enjoys listening to people speak about movies. Hence why we speak about movies so much. So pretty cool opportunity, man, for us to listen to sort of we have an interview from Film Companion with the main star, Fahadh Faasil, who played Joji in Joji, and what a performance that was. We have the director.
Spectacular.
It was amazing, man. Director, and we have the screenwriter as well. So pretty power packed combo right here, man. And I think these three have worked together in the past, so there's some synergy there. I don't know if I've seen any of movies myself from these three people together. But yeah, before we sort of get into it, Doug, what was sort of your I guess your fondest memories of this movie?
Well, I think that's why I'm really excited to watch this. Is like
Yeah.
I was one of those people that would make sure I bought the Blu-ray or the DVD or the 4K with as many of the making of featurettes as possible, and that's where this is going to be really cool for us to dig into it, because especially the screenwriting, like the way that the movie adapted the Shakespearean element was legendary, and like the specific cultural influence. Like I kind of hope we get into that a little bit
Yeah.
here. I really don't know what we're going to see, but I'm just really curious to hear more about the creative process, because it's just an effortless film that is constantly, absolutely crushing you with intensity and with a buildup of what is going to happen. If you have any familiarity with Shakespeare, like this is
Yes.
going to be tragic. But it worked so efficiently, so fluently, that you were enamored with it, and I still am. As I consider the movie, and as I talk to anybody here in America that has not seen anything from this wonderful industry, this is the first one that I point to. And then Mukund Uni. I feel like these are great
Yeah.
entry points for people who might have otherwise been, like myself, under the assumption that every movie that comes out of India is like a Bollywood film, which
Yeah.
is categorically wrong. And I can't be happier that I know otherwise now. And this is easily one of those movies that, from a production value standpoint, from a performance standpoint, from a storytelling standpoint, from an adaptation standpoint, it just checks all of these wonderful and remarkable boxes that it effortlessly exists as part of being the language of cinema, right? Like you almost don't even need to watch it with subtitles if you don't know the language to understand what is going on. And I'm really curious to see them discuss it. What about you?
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to this as well, man. I mean, that's a great summary of sort of what makes the movie so special. Definitely the two you mentioned, this movie and Mukunda Nuni Associates, will completely change. If you just watch those two movies as an outside audience, you will completely change your entire perspective of the entire Indian industry, I guess, all the film industries, because they are just completely different to what people have the perception of. I think like a dark comedy in Mukunda Nuni Associates and what this adaptation is just, I think this is the definition of a good adaptation, like taking something from a faraway land, basically taking into your own culture, your own world, making it close to home, but at the same time still paying a tremendous amount of respect to the original script, and the original
Absolutely.
sort of story that was told, which was interesting, because one piece of trivia was the screenwriter apparently didn't even sort of read Macbeth, but maybe it was sort of worked out to his benefit, because understanding the general principles and the overall morals that the story was sort of talking about, that's probably enough for you to have guidance and not be influenced too much.
Then you're not hamstrung by like, I need to make sure I get a nod to this. I need to make sure I get a
Yeah.
nod to this. I need to make sure I get a nod to that. I really enjoy that aspect, because it's existed in our cultural lexicon for so long that most of us are aware of these story
Correct.
beats, right?
Definitely.
And if you get too mired in that minutia, then you might lose some of the more effortless nature of how the story just kind of unfolds, right? And it was a tight movie, right? Like it wasn't even
No.
it didn't run over long, is what I mean. Like, so if you get too mired in a Shakespeare adaptation, all of a sudden you're looking at a 3 hour and 30-minute movie just because you want to make sure you have this character and a nod to this. And I enjoy that it hit the broad strokes, but didn't necessarily have to drill into the details.
Definitely. Yeah, no, so we'll get into it. Really looking forward to what they have to say. Again, we're both coming in, have not seen the interview before. We're keeping it real, keeping it as authentic as we can. Let's hope that they're going to talk about the points that we might have in our mind, but we'll see how it goes anyway. If they don't talk about some of those points, we can always pivot back and just talk about them afterwards. Or something like that. But yeah, let's go. This is special thanks to Film Companion. And obviously special thanks to all the people involved in this interview. We're looking forward to it. So we're just going to play it, react, and then keep going.
Fahadh, Dileesh, Shyam, so wonderful to have you on Film Companion. I want to begin by just congratulating you on Joji. It's a stunning film. One of the things that really intrigued me was that Shyam and Dileesh, with every film, the character that Fahadh is playing is becoming more complicated. It's becoming more complex. It's becoming more morally complex, becoming darker. Tell me why this is. Is this by design? Is this a coincidence? Is this because you've discovered Fahad's range as an actor and what he can do? What's going on with this happy man in Mahashinte Pratikaran going darker, darker, darker?
Why are we getting darker with Fahad? Actually, we have no option left. So we need to surprise each other for each movie we come up with. That's very tough ask to be. I don't know how Pedarshan and Lalsa did all these years, and they're still finding that joy of working together. We are actually, sometimes we are bored and we just push each other sometimes. It is very hard, not only with three of us, the editor, the editors has already seen so many close-ups of Fahad in Tondi Mudalam Thirachatti, and it's very hard to pick one unique thing. It's very hard to differentiate him with Shami and this Tondi Prasad. It's very hard. We are all one people. We are all similar kind of people. It's very hard actually, but we have managed to. Only way to make it more complicated, and that is the only way to escape from that. So we made it.
Yeah, if you can't convince us, confuse,
It's like that.
I think we'll just quickly touch on that. It's an interesting concept about when you sort of work together for a long time and how you sort of develop that relationship. Because it's got me thinking of sort of Hollywood sort of
well, absolutely
together
like Scorsese and DiCaprio is a pretty great modern example, especially with Killers of the Flower Moon coming out. Like, if you know somebody and you're really like pushing each other, you're constantly elevating one another, like a rising tide raises all ships. And I'm glad that we started right there. Like it's clear to me that these are two people who understand each other very well and do not shy away from going darker in much the same way that, like we understand there that like he's a joyful person, right? Like a lot of people love to talk to him and he's clearly having fun.
Yeah.
But like, Jim Carrey wasn't afraid to go dark. Robin Williams was very much not afraid to go dark. And especially in those circumstances where you make a choice to be like, all right, nobody's expecting this right now, it can work extraordinarily well like it did in this movie.
Definitely. It's interesting to see that. Because I guess, with like it sounds like they would have sort of grown together and evolved together from what it sounds like to see the complexities of this character sort of evolve over time. And sort of tapping into that a little bit more and more. The challenges they would have together was just, interesting to see the Robert De Niro one was pretty good. I think that when I think of like, Kurt Russell and John Carpenter used to work a lot together. I remember watching those guys sort of work together and sort of, I think sort of the final, my favorite movie of those two were probably the one about the China shop. What's that? Big Trouble in Little China.
Big Trouble in Little China. We don't want to turn this into a Big Trouble in Little China podcast. No. I want to say that right now.
Yep.
If any of you would like to talk to me about that movie, I am freely available and would love to do so. But another one is Tim Burton and Johnny Depp, right?
Definitely.
Like Tim Burton and Helena Bonham Carter. Like, these teams, they can absolutely push each other to a place of storytelling elevation where it's not necessarily just about one part or another part. Like it's a whole collaborative effort. And I love that it's not necessarily, even though it is very much his performance that is one of the linchpins in the movie, it's a painting of all of these different colors off that pastel that really makes it work. And I like that the director was even talking about that. Like I needed to differentiate him from all these other people because there's a darkness to almost every character in this movie, especially the brothers.
Yes.
those close-ups of Joji's face are extraordinarily effective to reminding you why this is the one you want to focus on.
Definitely. I think they're going to start touching about Macbeth. So looking forward to this talk, man. This is going to be interesting.
Absolutely.
Fahad, Macbeth has, of course, been played by the greats of cinema, from Toshiro Mifune in Throne of Blood to Irfan in Maqbool. Of course, your take in this film is very different. Joji's not a successful man. His own father calls him a loser. He's also extremely deceitful. In a sense, he's wearing a mask inside the house as much as he's wearing outside the house. And it was very unsettling. You're giving a performance within a performance. How did you do that?
Shyam and I were having this conversation the other day. So there are two things that how I look at it. So I have not read Macbeth in the recent times. I read it like a long time back. Even when Dileesh decided to do this, I didn't go back and read the text. I just wanted to take it on from here. So in my vague memory, I have this image of Macbeth is very unstable. He looks very powerful, and there's something about him which is very unstable. And that's while playing Joji, I mean that is the how I've tried to crack is I've tried to bring in that visible instability in this guy. And that's one. Two, see, because it's not a direct adaptive of Macbeth. You have the freedom to actually flow into the narrative and remind people where it needs to be reminded, and take your freedom and play it otherwise. So because it was not a direct adaptation like the other films which were made in India and overseas, we had the freedom to do it the way we wanted to do it. So to answer your first question, how it's how we keep how we done like all these films together. So basically, what I've evidently seen is I've not seen Shyam repeating himself. So when Shyam doesn't repeat, Dileesh doesn't repeat. So when Dileesh doesn't repeat, I don't repeat. So the idea is everyone is exploring individually. So the possibilities are wider, I think,
Dileesh, I read that you shoot your films chronologically, like in the scenes are shot in sequence. How do you think that adds to the storytelling?
അങ്ങനെ ഷൂട്ട് ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ ഒരു ഗുണം എന്താ വെച്ചാൽ മറ്റേ റൈറ്ററായിട്ടുള്ള ശ്യാമോ ഞാനും ഞങ്ങളിങ്ങനെ സംസാരിച്ചൊരു ഐഡിയയിലേക്ക് എത്തിയിട്ടുണ്ടാവും. പക്ഷെ ഇത് നമ്മുടെ ഒരു തോന്നലാണ് ഇത് ഇങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ വരുമായിരിക്കും എന്നുള്ളത്. നമ്മൾ ആ ഒരു ലൈൻ എഴുതുമ്പോൾ, ഒരു സീൻ ക്രിയേറ്റ് ചെയ്യുമ്പം, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അങ്ങനെ ഒരു സ്പേസ് നമ്മൾ ഡിസൈൻ ചെയ്തെടുക്കുമ്പോഴൊക്കെ അതിനകത്ത് ഒരു രസമുള്ള അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഇങ്ങനെ ഒരു ഇമോഷൻ ആ സീനിൽ നിന്ന് ക്രിയേറ്റ് ആവും എന്നുള്ളത് നമ്മുടെ ഒരു പ്രതീക്ഷയാണ്. പലപ്പോഴും നമ്മളിത് പ്ലേ ചെയ്ത് വരുമ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്ന മീറ്ററിനേക്കാളും മുകളിലായിട്ട് ആ പെർഫോം ചെയ്യുന്ന മൊമെന്റിൽ ചിലപ്പോൾ ആക്ടർക്ക് കോൺട്രിബ്യൂട്ട് ചെയ്യാനുണ്ടാവും. മറ്റു പല ഘടകങ്ങൾക്കും ആ സമയത്ത് ഒരുപാട് കോൺട്രിബ്യൂട്ട് ചെയ്യാനുണ്ടെന്നാണ് കരുതുന്നത്. അപ്പൊ അങ്ങനെ അത് കോൺട്രിബ്യൂട്ട് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുന്നതുകൊണ്ട്, അങ്ങനെ ഒരുപാട് സാധനങ്ങൾ ആഡ് ഓൺ ചെയ്യുന്നത് കൊണ്ട് അതിന് അങ്ങനത്തെ ഒരു എന്താ പറയാ, എന്താണ് നമ്മൾ ഷൂട്ട് ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുമ്പോഴും അതിന്റെ ഒരു തോട്ടിനപ്പുറത്തേക്ക് നമുക്ക് കുറച്ചും കൂടെ ഉറപ്പുവരുത്താൻ പറ്റുന്നുണ്ട് എങ്ങോട്ടേക്കാണ് സിനിമ ട്രാവൽ ചെയ്യുന്നത് എന്നുള്ളത്. അത് കുറച്ചും കൂടെ ഒരു ചിന്തിക്കാൻ നമുക്ക് കുറച്ചും കൂടെ അതിന് ഫ്രീഡം തരും തോട്ടിൽ ഞാൻ കരുതുന്നത്. സിനിമയുടെ നറേറ്റീവിനും ആ ഫ്രീഡം തരും. അതൊരു റിസ്ക് ആണ്, അതിൽ ഒരുപാട് എഡ്ജ് ഉണ്ട്. പക്ഷെ ആ റിസ്ക് ഞങ്ങൾക്ക് ഇഷ്ടമായതുകൊണ്ടാണ് ഞങ്ങൾ റിപ്പീറ്റ് ചെയ്ത് അതിങ്ങനെ ട്രൈ ചെയ്യുന്നതെന്നാണ് എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നത്.
And also it's very easy for the actors, Dileesh is all the films I've done with him, he's shot it chronologically, and it primarily helps the actors more than.
What did he say? Why does he prefer that?
He said
for the actors.
Not just for the actors, he said it's for the team as well. So he says, so what he says is, as he gets into the flow, suppose for example, if you shoot a particular scene today and the scene before that is shot after 5 days, and the intensity or the way you played it is different. So if you go in the order, there is even more scope to explore.
A few points there, man. We'll start off with the
man, I got to talk about that.
The chronological one was really interesting, actually, how they sort of do that. Because, it's interesting what directors sort of take. But before we get to that, man, the whole part about the Macbeth one I just want to touch on. Because, we did sort of touch on that a little bit as to, what makes this movie so great and a great adaptation. It's so interesting. Even Fahad had not actually, read the book. It's that powerful, like even we sort of went back and researched a little bit before our review to refresh our memories, but the actors themselves were just like, look, I remember this much about the character, and the actors, yet they were able to create such a good portrayal of Macbeth to the three of them. Basically, it's impressive that they didn't even have to read the source material like line by line. They could just be like, yep, I know about the character enough, and the points that they remember from back when they read it a while ago was so strong and so poignant that they can just basically take off from there. What do you think about his approach to the Macbeth character?
Well, I think that's great. I think that's wonderful. And it even so the 2 points that they just discussed kind of link one into the other.
Yeah.
You don't want to necessarily muck with your flow, right? So what do you remember about the story? Great. This is what I remember about the character. Okay. Those two things meet up. So then you don't have to remember what the other actor did when they made a shot at the beginning of the movie, but now we're shooting the end of the movie, right? Like Lord of the Rings is a great example of that, where they literally, the hobbits met Gandalf one day and the next day they were saying goodbye to him, and those two, and luckily it all kind of comes out in the wash. But I think the reason this movie and this particular adaptation works so well is because then your own specific cultural lens of how you perceived the story over generations of remembering it is what feeds into how you shape the character. So if this character was born in modern times in India, what would you think he looked like? Well, that's exactly what it is. And B, if you're telling the story and you want the emotionality of these characters to really hit, you got to make sure that the next scene you shoot comes directly after the one that you just did, especially with the way that Fahadh plays that character. You need to remember those subtleties because there's little twitches in his eyes. There's little smirks that he makes. And if you forget that he did that and you're shooting a scene that is interconnected the next day or not interconnected the next day, and you have to pick that up later, then a lot of that subtlety could be lost. And that just means somebody coming into the room with a totally different energy than they should have, right?
Yeah.
So both of those two things kind of feed directly into one another in my mind. They decided to say, what do we remember about this story? Okay, we know the core of its message. Let's do that. You know the character you want to play. I trust you. We now know that everyone else in the room will continue to tell this story as you inform it. Excellent. And I got to imagine that's the reason we ended up with this very specific, very poignant film, because it was a whole bunch of people working together linearly to tell us a story. And that was great.
Yeah, no, it was pretty fascinating. It's great to hear that because I guess, the point you made about sort of making it sure it's to your cultural lens by not sort of reading the original script, which is from obviously, Scotland, a sort of different world altogether. It sort of keeps you away from any of that sort of those references coming into you, even subconsciously. But if you read sort of, Macbeth, I don't know, did this in a certain way or something like that, it might just influence the way you act a little bit. Because this movie, you're right, it's so, his performance is, it's all about the subtleties, his little twitches that he makes, the little changes in body language,
the text messages.
The text messages. How he's frustrated inside, the door closes and he's sort of reacting to something. After that, he's running away somewhere. It's funny when she sort of at the start, the interviewer asked something like about, he's a very weak man. I just remember like one of my favorite scenes was like, I think when it's it's like the father is like, he's basically in a wheelchair and he just, exactly.
Throttling him.
Yep. You knew what I was going to say before I even said it. So that's.
I knew exactly what you were going to get to. And again, I think that's because it's so powerfully linear. Like the way, the choice to make it linearly means that these actors all were so committed to telling the story the way that his performance was informing it, that it allowed the director and the writer and everybody to set the scene so that from the very first moment he walked in with that kind of energy, everyone else got to react to it.
Definitely.
And then it got to compound throughout. So it's fascinating.
Yeah, it really is. The linear nature, I think, just really worked well for this movie. And it seems like it's a director choice that this is his sort of style of sort of making movies. So it'll be interesting to see some of his sort of other works with Fahadh and see how that sort of also goes and see. Because, Joji more than anything is like the breakdown of a character. So Fahadh himself, and as long with all Fahadh, like as Joji is breaking down, but all the other characters, the sort of nuances they also have, also helps them. So you get this complete package. Nothing feels out of place from anyone, which is what makes this movie so cohesive. Like you don't feel like this character's out of place, because of whatever reason, and that character's not acting like he should. Like the brothers had such a huge role in this. The father was in for like the first half, but he could basically play a father who's powerful at one stage, then has to get basically surgery to get better, but comes back strong again until his eventual downfall. So he has a whole journey which he can sort of map out and just act accordingly. It's fascinating. I really found that really interesting to hear about the directional process from from Dileesh Pothan, basically. So
yeah, it's very
awesome.
cool.
Very cool, man. Yeah, pretty good interview so far, man. Looking forward to sort of seeing what they speak about next.
You can always try variations, and it's like what you eventually said was, it's more than everything, it's fun to do a film that way. So
Fahad, you said that you meet Shyam once when he starts writing, once in the middle, and once at the end. So I want to know, what are these meetings like? How are you? Do the two of you fight? You're also a co-producer on these movies. I don't know, how much do you shape the story?
No, we see, the meeting is for the meeting's sake. We talk about other films and the best film he did, he watched last, and there's hardly any discussion or not. Before I'm leaving, they'll say, just grow your beard, or just take off your beard. That's the meeting is for, this thing. And another thing is they basically want a clarity of when are you shooting this? So, these are the two things discussed in all the meetings, not what we are shooting, when, and, how I should be when we're going to shoot. And everything else happens on the sets, I mean, basically Shyam gives me like I said, the first meeting, he gives me, they basically give me an idea and see if I'm equally excited and if I can travel with them. So once that is there, then sort of, we travel together, we explore this together.
It's not easy as it sounds, but we trust each other. But actually it's a burden actually. We trust each other and say few lines, and we just when to start a move, when to starting a movie and making a movie. That's tough actually. We are trusting too much. So I was telling Macha, if there is anything wrong, just tell me on the face or correct it. Because too much friendship and too much trust can actually harm the movies. So
there's a very interesting combination that not many people know. So Shyam never narrates a scene. Dileesh does that. As a scene, like, so,
Right.
okay, the Shami's introduction scene.
Huh.
Tondi Mudal. Let's take Tondi Mudal.
Huh.
So a scene of Tondi Mudal is always narrated by Dileesh. Shyam just narrates the narrative of the feel of the film. Most of the time the scenes will not even be there. He says that to get the feel of the film. Eventually the scene is basically narrated by Dileesh, and every day morning before.
I sort of talk about, like, I love having that little, behind the curtain peek and sort of seeing how sort of it's all sort of made in the background. But yeah, pretty interesting. Sounds like Shyam, the writer, basically he sort of gives the overarching picture from what it sounds like, and then Dileesh, the director, will be more like, all right, this is how we want to actually do this specific scene, and Fahad actually enacts it. So it's actually a pretty cool 3-tier sort of structure they have going on there. But interesting, man. What were your thoughts about sort of some of the stuff they mentioned, even about sort of the working too closely and sort of not getting the right results because you're friends and stuff like that? I completely, like, that part to me, I was like, yeah, I can definitely see that happening, because you just, you yourself, when you start working together, you might start having a vision that's together. Like, this is our vision, but they have to at the same time be individual and be able to pull that apart and be like, I don't think this will work because of this reason. And having the healthy debate is very important. But yeah, man, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, well, no, I think it's also in trust, right? So, like,
Yes.
you can even avoid the healthy debate because you trust that person has a good idea and a good vision for what they're doing.
Yeah.
So that I found that really interesting. Where he was like, okay, cool. So is this idea something you can get behind? That's step one. Step two, when they meet up a little bit later on, shave your beard.
Yeah.
And then step three, be here on this day, right? Like, so that way the character gets to decide on the angle of their performance as relates to the overall theme of the movie. And then when he gets there with his performance idea already baked in, then the director is going to say, this is what's happening in the scene. That sounds wonderful. That sounds like a great collaborative working environment to me. And funny enough, last week I had watched an interview, I think it was with Esquire, where Danny Elfman was talking about his collaborations with Tim Burton over the years and with other directors, but mostly Tim Burton. And they have a very similar process where he will show up and Tim will say, this is what the movie is going to be like. And he gives him very broad strokes and then he goes, bye. And then they come together like basically the moment the movie starts shooting. And Danny Elfman will have an entire score ready to go. like an entire thematic kind of score in his mind. And he said for one of the movies, he like had to abandon it pretty quickly. You know, like he had 2 different ideas in his mind, and for one of them, he had to abandon it, and that was pretty much it. But they just trust each other.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it's very similar here, where they know, like, nope, you are a good performer, so I know you're going to do this well, so long as you agree that this is a story you'd like to tell. And I'm really interested in making this movie, and he's going to shoot it this specific way to tell a specific thing about this specific scene that day. And they all just come in, put their pieces on the chessboard, and each of them plays the role they were going to play. Wonderful.
Yeah, really cool to see, man. Yeah, just enjoying hearing them talk about sort of this movie. And I'm glad this is not just about Joji, actually. It's about actually their relationship and how they work together. I think they've mentioned that movie, Tondi Shyam. I think I've actually seen that movie. So it's the second time I'm seeing this collaboration. I might actually get yourself to check that movie out too, because it's sort of a continuation.
Please do.
It's a pretty fantastic movie. Definitely very different to Joji. But it's probably got more elements of comedy in it, so you get to see a bit of a lighter side from Fahadh especially, but it's a really interesting, fascinating story. So yeah, man, I'm actually now like I'm going to look out for when these 3 work together, sort of the next project together, because it's I've enjoyed obviously Joji so much, and to see that partnership sort of keep growing and growing. Like, what are they going to do next? How are they going to take this character, this actor? What are they going to push him to do next? And I loved how I think something Fahadh said was something like they never repeat themselves. So the screenwriter will never repeat his sort of themes. Therefore the director won't repeat whatever he's doing, and therefore Fahadh won't repeat whatever he's doing. So they all sort of evolve naturally by doing that. I just find that awesome to sort of have this collaboration, and it's cool to see, man. Like, I love sort of seeing this sort of groups or pairings or whatever you want to call them, teams. Yeah, it just makes for great viewing. But yeah, sort of keep going on this one.
We shoot. He gives you a narration, and that and we take it on from there.
So, the specific beats of Joji, the expression on his face, when I mean, I don't want to give too much away. I don't want this interview to spoil the fun of the movie for people who haven't seen it yet. But when Binsi, the sister-in-law, tells him wear a mask, and that means so much more than just wear a mask. Those little moments when he tells the relative, no, don't book your ticket. He's on the phone. How do you create those moments? Is it just instinctive because you know what this character would do?
No, I mean, these detailings are always given to me by Dileesh and Shyam, So I think, the only scene that was told to me before the shoot was this particular mask scene, So, it's always like that. They'll give you a scene which actually gets you to think about the character. You sort of, you start thinking in your head how the character got there, and, So, I mean, this was one scene that was always there even when we started shooting. And so I don't know. I don't know if he's taken the take I like. There was a take I really liked, but he liked something else. I think he's taken what he likes.
Tell me, did you you're a massive star. Did you ever sort of worry about not being likable on screen?
No, see, so when I was in America, like during my college days, I've read this interview of Kevin Spacey. He's rarely given interviews, So there was something he said which actually I thought was very exciting. So what he said is that audience basically think about, when they're watching See You Soon, if they think about Tundi Mudal, which means that See You Soon is not working, So the only time people get distracted from your film is, if people get reminded of earlier work is because your film is not working. So for me, it is very, evidently I ensure that the exercise is actually fresh. The interactions are very fresh when
he's not thinking of liking him as an actor or something. He's just concerned about whether people will like Joji or not.
Shyam, tell me, is it true that you only start writing once a location has been approved and you've seen it?
Yes. The Padmarajan sir, the earlier masters we have, is just we have a one line in mind and we go for location tracking
Whoa,
and find the location and write the rest of the thing.
So the location is that integral to
Oh,
your
man.
actual
That's
narrative
wild.
that you, unless you've seen and approved the location, you can't even write.
Yes, absolutely.
That's amazing.
That sometimes there is a flashes coming. There are some scenes I get with these flashes, but the totality comes in when once we find out the location and Dileesh and me go there and see that yahan se wo aayega, that kind of thing happens, and you elaborate that thing and make it to
Suppose
complete scene.
sometimes we have some practical difficulty to നമുക്ക് ഒരു ലൊക്കേഷൻ കിട്ടാൻ ബുദ്ധിമുട്ടപ്പോ നമ്മൾ ആ ലൊക്കേഷൻ മാറിയിട്ടുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ സ്വാഭാവികമായിട്ട് സീൻ തന്നെ മാറുമെന്ന് തോന്നുന്നുണ്ട്. ഓട്ടോമാറ്റിക്കലി നമുക്കിപ്പോ ഇന്ന് ഈ ലൊക്കേഷൻ പ്ലാൻ ചെയ്താണ് അവിടെ എന്തെങ്കിലും ഒരു അസൗകര്യം ഉണ്ടായിട്ട് നമ്മൾ നാളെ വേറെ ലൊക്കേഷനിലേക്ക് മാറ്റിയാലും എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്ന ആ സീൻ മാറുമ്പോൾ ആ സീൻ ലൈറ്റ്സ് മാറുന്നുണ്ടെന്നാണ്.
I want to add a point. I believe that if there is a person, the distance between them actually, according their vocabulary changes according to the distance between the characters. So it's very important that how the characters are placed, and I think the dialogue changes if the distance is more.
Wow, man, that last part kind of blew my mind a little bit.
That's legendary.
Yeah, that's so cool. So he won't start writing until he sort of knows the location, which I think is like, I mean, let's just take Joji specifically for the example. Like you can tell why this movie is so well written and the nuance that it has, the intricacies that he's sort of taken into place. Small confined house. What can I do within these confines? How can I make this environment work to my advantage? You can't create that story. Like again, not reading the source material works again in this scenario, right? Like Macbeth's obviously shot across, castles. There's travel involved. There's whole involved. In this, none of that is even available to him. Obviously, there's also the whole concept of this was shot during COVID. So, that itself is another confine. But I think just the fact that he doesn't write before he sort of knows the location is pretty crazy. So he would have just, I guess.
That's amazing.
He has
it's amazing.
thought. He has a thought, and then he goes and visits the place, and then he sees if that's actually a viable place to make this movie or not. Fascinating. I'm just blown away. What do you think, man?
Well, and what he said there, where he was like, the dialogue will get more intense as the characters get closer together. Does this house have a space where we can actually do that? Like, the long and short of it is, because I'm also blown away, is that right there is what makes this industry so incredible to me. Because I can't imagine that he's the only person who puts that amount of effort into his writing from the movies I've seen thus far.
Yeah.
Because they're all so concentric. They're all buttoned up so specifically. And in Hollywood, whatever, we got a green screen, baby. We're going to do whatever we want. Here, with practical sets and practical locations, and you're actually talking to these people, like, this is a true collaborative effort that kind of harkens back to like Hollywood in the 1960s, all the way back to the 1920s. This is not something that is very common here anymore, with the exception of some directors, right? I imagine Wes Anderson is definitely somebody who would be very similar to him in this. But again, he's building his sets, right? Like, they're all hyper stylized. That staggered me. I mean, we both immediately looked at each other and like, what? Like, that's uncommon. I don't want to say it's unheard of, because I'm sure other people do that, but it is uncommon and very indicative of why these movies are so good. Because if you care that much that your scenes and your setting need to be able to do what your story in your head could potentially do, then of course your movie is going to be good. And Fahadh talking about, like, I don't care if people like Joji, like, that's all very good, all of that stuff, but I expected that already. And obviously the movie, was not necessarily a commercial hit, but a critical hit, and is a huge boon. But that right there, if you're looking for a reason why this movie is so incredible, look no further than that.
Yeah.
It's three people who trust each other for one person in that triumvirate of trust to be like, that's not the right spot. Not going to start writing the movie yet. And they just go, okay. Holy shit.
It's pretty incredible. And I'm sure that same philosophy, unfortunately, we're not able to hear much from the director. I think there's some language issues, I think, with he's not able to communicate as well, I think. But he mentioned one line about sort of the energy about the settings as well. So I think it also, that thing carried over to him as well, the way he can shoot the atmosphere of the movie, because we saw this was like a dark, somber movie. In this house, how can he use lighting, for instance, working with the cinematographer, to basically create that mood, that atmosphere that we get? We have some scenes in this, like with using the I think the staircases that they used, right, to carry the body up with things like that.
Yeah.
Some spiral scenes. So they've done some,
with the father,
yeah,
with him
stretcher.
actually doing the like pull-ups there.
Oh, the pull-ups one, yeah, that one as well at the start. So obviously, I think this whole concept about knowing your location first is one fascinating, but I don't think it's just specific to the writer as well. I think it applies just as much to the director. And like, if he has a movie, his vision, it has to match the setting, because he was saying like you can't do stuff that's not practical, which is what you mentioned about the green screen with Hollywood. It's like, yep, cool, we need something here. Let's just put a green screen. Here you are, the actors do something in front of the screen, and you don't get that connection. Whereas this movie, you see everything is so a movie like this especially
integral.
Integral, and it's like so intimate, I guess, and that's because of the settings. Again, they use that to their advantage. Yeah, that's a fascinating part, man. You're right, the stuff that Fahad said about, I think See You Soon is another movie he actually did, which again I've sort of seen, which is a mind-blowing movie, man. Actually, it's one of those movies that are shot online. So if you've seen the movie Searching,
no, I watched a review on that.
Yeah. So that one. So it's very similar to that. All just on the iPhone and all that stuff. But I kind of expected. Yep, it's kind of a softball kind of question, like not one that really got us a deep insight. But that second part was like, wow. That's probably the highlight of the interview.
I did not expect that at all. But that's exactly what we were talking about when we first got into this. Like, I'm fascinated by the construction process of these movies, and there's no clear like, oh man, what's the secret sauce? Like what are all these people trying to do? Like, well, there it is. Every single person involved in this production is that level of committed. I guarantee you, they're all that level of committed. And that is the clearest example, like maybe the most extreme example of how committed they are and what those ramifications are by the time you see it on screen. Because it's a subtle thing. You would never know without hearing that. Right? No. You would never know. But now it makes all the sense in the world, and the movie would not be as effective as it is without that.
Incredible, man. That was unbelievable. I'm hoping for a few more gems like that. Let's see. You'll probably look to wrap it up pretty soon.
So the sense is less, the vocabulary.
The high energy, everything
will be changed. So,
Dileesh, you talked about how the second film was, in a sense, drier than Mahishinte. Thondimuthalam is less entertaining in that typical sense. You said you felt that you could be, you didn't have to make people laugh in every scene. It was just sort of tougher in a way. Now this film, Joji, has gone many steps ahead, right? It's very minimalist. It's very spare. It's not it's not happy in that sense at all. Did you feel the freedom to do this because the first two films were such big successes, or because you knew it was going on a streaming platform, so there's no pressure to have that box office thing happen? How did you arrive at these choices?
Both happened, actually. Both supported me, actually.
All the elements
because if the success of the Thondimuthalam Thondimuthalam is also a commercial hit. So that gave me more confidence again. Okay, the entertainment is less in Thondimuthalam. Then also people are there; they are enjoying that film.
Actually, Thondimuthalam collected more than Mahesh.
More than Mahesh.
Wow.
Yeah. So I thought. Then I realized the entertainment we can put in different ways. So we tried in Joji or in our third film we try to reduce the entertainment and we have the confidence people will enjoy. But at the same time it's in the OTT platform, so we don't have that much commitment like in theater. If it is in the theater, we have to give more entertainment assurance to the audience, I think. And the audience is different. If it is a OTT, Prime and all have that much wide range of audience, and in pan-Indian the movie will reach. All that and these two actually supported me to make Joji more dry.
Yeah. You know, you say pan-Indian. Fahad, you are now a bona fide pan-Indian star.
Just quickly, I don't know, Doug, if you know, pan-Indian means basically across all of India. So
Across the
all
various states, yeah.
the various industries, really. So just sort of just mentioning that, yeah, he's a star in I don't know if he's a star in Bollywood or not, but what she's implying is that he's a star in like the Bollywood industry, like the Telugu film industry, the Tamil film industry, as well as Malayalam. He's definitely a star in the Tamil industry. I know he's done a few movies there. I don't know about the others. But yeah, I guess we could just quickly, since I paused, touch on that point as well. I did really find that fascinating because like this is one point that I keep thinking about. Like they talk a lot about pan-Indian, but like apart from like Amazon, I really think they should be thinking more about how do they get international audiences, because these movies
international, yeah,
like a movie like Joji is going to appeal to basically anyone that is really like just like real cinema fanatics and really just want to see that real character driven story. So yeah, I think they should really be putting more emphasis on that and speaking about that a bit more, because you got Amazon, you got Netflix, you got these platforms that will reach, you watch it on Amazon same way I did, America, Australia, like it's not it's available to both of us. So what do you think about that, man? The potential for these films breaking out of just a pan-India world.
I think that's one of the more fascinating things, and part of the reason I'm so excited to be a part of the show, and why you niched it down this far, right? Because we've talked about a whole bunch of different movies before we started really focusing on these movies, and I'm glad that we do, because again, green screen, franchises, all of these things that Hollywood does so spectacularly well, and they've got the money to put them into all different international spaces. That's all well and good, and obviously I owe a lot of who I am and what my personality is to those movies. But the core of what good storytelling is in some of those movies still, but it's now subservient to spectacle, right? So, and I loved hearing the director here talk about the fact that, those first two movies were commercially successful. So I now have the freedom in my own mind to go to a place that isn't necessarily, and he keeps saying entertainment. Well, it's very entertaining. The movie is very entertaining. Definitely. It's not fun, but it is engaging. I'll qualify it that way.
Yeah.
Because if you do go into cinemas, we were just talking about the new Indiana Jones before we hit record, and like it might be considered a flop, even though it will make gobs of money, just because it took so much money to make initially, and people are going to be waiting for it to hit a streaming platform where they don't have to go to the theater, because they also probably know what the story is going to be. Here with Joji, yes, it's Macbeth, but how do you do Macbeth in India? How do you do it in a house? How do you do it during COVID? And how do you do it so engagingly that you could remove language and make it a silent film and it would still be as engaging as it is? Each of these movies that we've watched have had such incredible pathos to them that you cannot help but be brought in by the story. We don't have a Thanos. We don't have ghosts. We don't have any of that stuff. We just have really, really good collaborative teams, because it's not just a performance. It's not just a writer. It's not just a director. You have these people working diligently to be able to together craft a spectacular story. And what we hear in this interview, and I'm glad it was this interview that you chose me for, time and time again, is that these people trust each other, and time and again, their story is going to be wonderful. Their story is going to be a phenomenal story, and that deserves to be seen internationally. So that long way to answer your very simple question, they absolutely should. Pan-Indian is wonderful, and I like many independent films that are made here in the U.S., very small local regional films, even here in my state. Some of these just deserve international attention, and that's what streaming does. It gives you the opportunity to put it up there today, like an audiobook that I made will be available to listen to globally this week. You could do that same thing. Right? But then, the only problem is it kind of gets lost in like who has rights where in what regions. And I understand there's some of that stuff there, but I'm glad that Amazon pumped money into bringing that to us, you in Australia and me here in America. And they did it with Dristream 2, and I got to imagine they'll continue to do it, because as audiences, especially international audiences, continue to understand how good these stories are, you'll start to see them be pushed more and more to your forefront. They will be in your suggested viewing, and I'm glad they will be.
No, definitely right. It's really interesting. Like I think it's something about right time, right place. It feels like this movie sort of fell into the sort of lap a bit like that too, because obviously they've had commercial success. Doing a movie like this would be pretty wild as your first kind of movie, because as we sort of said, it's not a fun movie, unlike the other two, which seemed like they were more fun. Like Dondu, which I've seen, the Tashim is definitely a lot of fun. So there's a lot of entertainment there. So it is a risky thing to do for a director. But then again, in saying that, the other movie we referenced in this review somehow is Mukunda Nuni Associates, which was a directional debut, which again was more fun, more commercial, but I think it wasn't a commercial hit actually for some reason. Maybe it was because they were bold and went to the darker path and try to find something there. So right time, right place for this movie, and right platform definitely to have this. But I'm really hoping the conversation starts shifting towards more, international as well as pan-Indian, because we want to be included in these conversations, as the fans of these movies. But before we wrap it up with the last 2 minutes, I think.
I'm so weird.
But it's time for you to accept this. It's time for you to say, yes, I am. Okay? No?
Few films I do, not all the films.
Some of we are Mallus, we are more modesty is our thing, like we are Mallus.
You need to take a page out of Bollywood and say, yes, I'm a big star. But tell me, Fahad, does the fact that now the content is pan-Indian, does that put any pressure on you in any way in terms of the choices you're making?
No, I don't see it like that. I've never tried to make a film for a set audience or anything. We've always tried to explore what we believe in, and we could have made a Tondi Madal which was even more commercial. Like I don't have to be modest about it. I'm very sure about it. We could have made a Maheshwar Pratikaram which was even more commercial. We could have made a Tondi Madal which was even more commercial. We could have made a Joji which was even more commercial. So the idea is to stay honest to the art or the thing that we believe in. I don't think it doesn't put any kind of pressure on me. As long as I believe that my the attempts are good, I think the film should speak for itself.
All right, well, that will do it for the interview, man.
I think you can't even say anything better about that than what Fahad just said himself there. Like the movies are good, they speak for themselves, and this interview was so good it spoke for itself. I've got nothing left to say that we haven't already said.
No, just a big special mention to Film Companion. I thought the interviewer was great. She asked some pretty great questions there to really get the three of them talking. I think that was really good. So it was, again, can't be coming blind. So sometimes you just never know. It could have just been leaning on one direction where they just talk about Fahad maybe and the other two was the side. But no, I think they really achieved what we wanted. We sort of said if they didn't cover any questions, which we didn't have, we'll talk about it. But I'm like you, man. They actually talked about everything that I want to discuss. So really not much more to say, man. We'll probably just leave it there. Thanks a lot, everyone, for listening. We really appreciate the support. And
thank you so much.
We'll see you
as
guys
always.
Soon.
Thank you.
Leave all comments, all suggestions, like always. The comment section. We'd love to see more of which movies of these guys would you like us to see more of. So we just know of two that they've mentioned. If there's any others, let us know. But Doug, this was awesome, and I'll catch you on the next one.
This was great.
There, man. There we go. Stopping.